Hello everybody! What you're looking at right now are two images from the dual telescope rig, and there are two setups here. Basically I've got a version of Nina there, so that is the master scope, and the master scope has the camera, a focuser, the mount and a guider connection. And then the secondary rig has on here you have a camera and a focuser, and it's all working at the moment. I have to say it has been really difficult to get this working. There is an issue with, I don't know if it's the camera drivers, the cameras, or Nina. But what happens is when, so if I just show you, basically that's the secondary rig, and so basically you've got one image there, and then on the primary rig it's there. So you can see, now this is a bit difficult to frame these, you can see that the framing is almost the same. It's super close, and it's been really difficult to get the framing on both of these to be as close as this, because when you loop an image, so here you have a thing where you can loop an image, so I do a 4-second exposure and I loop it, but when you've got two versions of Nina, the cameras hang, and they'll do a 4-second exposure and then it'll wait for the image, and sometimes it'll download and then sometimes it won't, and it'll hang, and the only way to bring it back is to disconnect your camera, go outside, pull the power, pull the USB, plug it back in again, and it brings the camera back. That is so difficult, and also you'll be stood in the garden with your phone trying to on VNC, trying to get Wi-Fi connections, and VNC would disconnect as well. Then your cameras will disconnect, and then you realize that you haven't got your framing exactly how you want it, and it's really, really difficult to get the two telescopes in exactly the same position doing exactly the same thing. I cannot emphasize how difficult that is, but it's now doing it. So I'm not going to touch it. I'm going to see if I can get a couple of hours or maybe an hour of data. My other rig is imaging, but I haven't checked it for a couple of hours because I've been too busy with this one. Now, this is interesting. I've never used the advanced sequencer before, so let's have a quick look. You're probably all going to scream and shout at me and say, that's not how you do it, but this is how I've done it, and it seems to work, and it did a meridian flip. So this is the advanced sequencer. At the top here, going up to the top. So first of all it was blank. Then I got deep sky object instruction set and I put that in the middle. I then dragged a take many exposures. So it was down here. Where are we? I think it's a bit lower. Nope, it's further up. Probably under camera actually. Dome camera, here we go. There you go. So take many exposures, and then you drag that and you put it under the instructions here, and then I wanted it to do a meridian flip, I wanted it to autofocus on an HFR increase, and I wanted synchronized dithering. Now synchronized dithering is the bit that synchronizes this version of Nina with this version of Nina. So if I go into the sequencer here as well, you'll see that I've dragged synchronized dithering, and that one's got synchronized dithering, and I wanted it to dither on every 3 exposures, and you can see that it counts them down. So when it's done an exposure, it goes 1, 2, 3, and then it synchronizes the two programs to dither together, so there's not an exposure whilst dithering is on, or rather dithering won't take place whilst an exposure won't take place whilst dithering's taking place. Does that make sense? I hope it makes sense. Anyway, so the two rigs are now basically imaging. I'm only doing 1 minute exposures because Andromeda's core will get absolutely blown out if you take really long exposures. So 60 seconds is fine. The other thing which has been awful this evening has been my guiding. As you can see, it's above an arc second. It's 1.35. There's a very good reason for that, and that is me. I have not done a very good job of A, polar alignment, and B, setting up the scopes very well. The reason for that is I did not realise it was going to be clear tonight, so I just threw everything out and then fought my way through, and that has caused me no end of troubles, really has. But it did do a meridian flip, it did plate solve and recenter the object, and you know, that's all good. So you can see dither, 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 which is why it's all spiky there, and the rest is kind of a bit, anyway, so that's kind of guiding is a bit rubbish, but that's okay, because if, oh no, go away Windows. So if I now go back into Nina, so you can see here it's waiting for synchronized dither, it says down there, and waiting for synchronization. So as soon as this finishes an exposure, the two will coordinate together, and then dithering will happen. So in about 8 seconds, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, so dithering, this one's also doing an autofocus, and under imaging, I think if we go into PhD2, we'll see it is dithering at the moment, so dithering will appear any second now, hopefully. Oh, it didn't, so what have I done wrong? It hasn't dithered. So let me look in the sequencer. I don't know. I don't know what's gone wrong. Oh, it could be because of the autofocus. Let's see if autofocus does its thing. So autofocusing on this scope. And then hopefully when this has done its autofocus routine, it will then synchronize the two. There's another thing which is really, really annoying about these two scopes. I bought one scope about, well, my wife gave me one of these scopes about 4 years ago, and it's great. And then 4 years later I bought a second-hand one which was much older, and I can assure you they are the same scopes, but the focal length is marginally different between the two scopes. I kid you not. So that's bizarre, and the reason I identified that is I looked at the focuser tubes, and the focuser tubes, one of them is slightly further out than the other one, so by about a centimetre I would say. And it's oh hello, I've got some chat. Hello, hi. So does it make a difference? Yes, it does make a difference, and I can assure you it's been driving me bonkers because not that bit, let's just minimize that one, because when you try and match the stars on an image, there you go, so that's synchronized there with an exposure, so the two have synchronized now. So that one is now at 11 and that one is at 11, 12, 13, so they've synchronized. So that synchronization plugin for Nina is amazing, it's really good. So how can you tell? It's really annoying. So when you look at the field of view, I know it's difficult because I've not set up the windows exactly the same. Trust me, it's really difficult to get everything done. I've been doing this about 2 hours already just to get this far. Does it make a difference? Yes, the field of view is slightly different, and it makes a difference if you are trying to identify stars when you're aligning the two scopes. So for this one, I've tried to take, obviously, Andromeda as the center. There's a mini sub-galaxy bit there and a mini sub-galaxy bit there, and there's a great big star there. So I've also tried to align that so that I've got, if I try and just move this one across a bit, I'm hoping you'll see, but I've tried to get those two stars and those two stars the same, this little sub-galaxy and that sub-galaxy the same, and that little sub-galaxy there, and then obviously Andromeda as near as I could get it to the middle. So it's really difficult to align the two telescopes so that they are both taking the same exposures. And the other thing, they hang. I don't know if it's a bug in Nina or if it's a bug in camera drivers. One thing I will say though is that there's another astrophotographer who's got an amazing triple rig, and they're using ZWO cameras. Now ZWO of course are renowned for their cameras and the maturity of their drivers, and he's had the same issue with the cameras disconnecting, and you then have to power cycle the camera to bring it back. But this is working now, so I'm going to just leave it alone. So yeah, I thought you guys would be interested in a bit of the dual telescope rig, because this is it. It's working. Well, I say it's working. I kind of hope it's working. Yeah, so we've now got, so it's imaging there. Let's have a look in the sequencer. So exposure is 2 of 3. So hopefully this, once this one has finished, it should then synchronize with dithering on the other scope, on the main scope. There you go. So dither has now been engaged there. So if we quickly look in PhD2, you can see there's dither appears behind my head at the moment, which is a bit annoying. Basically, you kind of have to take my word for it. It says dither just there, and so it's dithering. And then now that dithering is complete, if I go back into Nina, and there, and you can see they're both now exposing again, is magic. It's really good, really good. So the whole purpose of this dual telescope rig was to try and take twice the amount of light gathering in, so for every hour you get 2 hours in essence, but there is also a formula which you can apply that tells you that you get a lower F number, and I'll when I do a video on this, I'll go into more details about the actual F, but it turns out when you combine all of the images together, that's if I can combine the images together, it should be around about F3.5 for these two scopes combined together, which is quite fast, or quite a large amount of light gathering. Yeah, so that's it. It's kind of working. Guiding though, so I should know better than this. I genuinely should. I should balance my scope properly, and I should rig it all properly. But this is only the second time I've been able to rig everything and have a go with the two scopes, simply because we have not had very amenable weather, shall we say. It's been rubbish. So I've actually got a third telescope on a second rig, imaging, and I haven't checked that one for ages, so I'm kind of hoping it's working. I might close this down in a second and go and get the mono rig up so you can have a look at the mono rig as well, which is on the Sol Nebula. Okay, loads of people been chatting. Cool. So, Matt, that's beautiful. Thank you very much. You're very kind. Will two scopes produce a 3D-ish image? It would. I'm not going to. The way I will process it will be just a normal photographic image. I suppose if you had the knowledge and the skill to be able to do that, then yes, you could probably do something weird and wonderful. I don't have that knowledge, but so it won't be a 3D image-ish thing, but yeah, it's oh, you see, look at that, see, it's drifting. See how my stars are drifting? They're drifting out of the circles, and it's probably because of dithering, or it's at least coming up to dithering. So focal length, yeah, so focal length wise on these two scopes, they are 650 millimeters focal length. So I could go and get the formula. I wrote it down upstairs in the office, so but I'm downstairs, so yeah, so in essence it's a, you're absolutely right. So if it was 300, I think you basically divide, oh, I can never remember, I'm going to have to go and guess it. So the 130 PDS is a 650 millimeter focal length scope, and I'm using it at native focal length for this. It's quite a nice wide field of view, and you can get some nice big objects in it, like of course the Andromeda Galaxy. So yeah, it gives you that lovely field of view. Of course, the field of view is entirely dependent on your sensor size, of course. So so the cameras are, they're actually Altair cameras, but they are a Tube Tech camera, because that's what Altair cameras are, and it is the 269C, and I have to say it is probably the best value camera that I've ever used. Really good. It does like its calibration frames though. It does like to have a full set of everything. So flats, darks, bias. Yes, it does need bias. Dark flats or flat darks. What if I missed out? Flats, darks, bias, lights. Basically everything. Needs everything. And it'll then stack and it'll give you a lovely flat field of view. You can see typical vignetting. The other scope again has a different, so I tried so hard to make these scopes identical, and you can see they're not. They are not identical, but that's okay, it's fine. But yeah, and also I did a bunch of cable management on the scopes as well, so that they all now have fewer dangly cables, which is good. So that's much better. So what would something smaller look like with that, e.g. the veil? So the veil's pretty massive actually. The veil, you would be able to do bits of the veil, but let's say you chose a tiny galaxy, it would be very small. The sweet spot for focal length for big objects is sub 1000 millimeters really. So anything, some of these objects are so massive that you can't fit them into a short focal length, even because they're so big. So the Seda region, for example, is just massive. There are loads of beautiful bits in there, so you just have to choose the bit you want. The other scope, which is imaging at the moment, has a 533 sensor, which is a small sensor, but it's a very short focal length. I think I'm working at 288 millimeters on that, and that is fitting in all of the Sol nebula, and it just fits it in frame beautifully. It's really nice. So essentially, for the big objects, you would like to use a shorter focal length, and for the tiny objects such as small galaxies, you want to use a longer focal length, sort of 1,000 millimeters plus. Obviously, that there are considerations for both because sensor size comes into it as well. This is not an APS-C size sensor, so it's smaller than that, and 650 millimeters fits Andromeda quite well. It's not bad at all. So the other thing to consider is some scopes cannot cope with a huge sensor. So I know that my small scope outside would be beautiful with this sensor, but if I put an APS-C size sensor in there as well, such as the 26C camera, I will find that the stars have artifacts on the edges. So you would need a really good field flattener, and also you'd need to sort out your backspacing hugely to make sure they are as accurate as possible. Interesting. So this scope has refocused now far more than this scope. So I'm going to investigate. So that one's refocusing. Let it do its thing. I did put focusing. HFR increase, yeah. See, I do think that this one needs to focus. So maybe I'm going to add a focus routine, maybe after a number of exposures. I'm going to put it there, and I'm going to do after, say, 30 exposures. Actually, no, I'll do 25. So now I've added to this in this part of the sequence. So basically the triggers after oh no, I've done the wrong thing. I didn't want that. Synchronized to that after every 2, and I want 25. Actually, I'm going to go 20 exposures. There you go. Sorry, I was editing the synchronized tether. So essentially, when the autofocus routine, when we've taken 20 exposures, it should kick off with an autofocus routine. Am I using Newtonians? Yes. Yes, I am using Newtonians. I'll try and find your photo. I've got photos. Maybe that would it would actually help, wouldn't it, if I showed you what's out there? Let me I'll find a photo and I'll email it to myself. Bear with me, caller. Well, I just go through. That's a good one. Okay, so this was the other day. Let me just call it up. Okay. There you go. This is what's in the garden at the moment. Let me just get you back on the screen. Okay, so we've got here 2 Newtonians. They are Skywatcher 130 PDS scopes, and I've got the 269C cameras here, and then I've got 2 autofocuses. That's a Pegasus Astro autofocuser, and this one is called a Gemini focuser. Now, the Pegasus Astro one is beautiful. It's really nice. This one is also really good, and although it's an AliExpress special, and I think I paid 50 or 60 quid, these ones are very expensive. They are beautiful though, and you can't compare the two. They're engineered differently, but I can't fault that Gemini one. I really can't. Obviously the software is better designed, it just is, but it just works. You have to select which COM port in the driver each time you connect it, but that's okay. So I designed this 3D printed dew shield, so they're in 3 parts. There's a part there, and then a top part, and then obviously a cap. So I've printed 2 of those, and then I've designed, this is actually different now. It's thicker, and I need to put some extra support on it. It does still flex slightly, but the guide scope is in the middle. I've also 3D printed off Thingiverse. I didn't design this one, but off Thingiverse the spiders as well are replaced, and that has made a huge difference to maintaining collimation. I mean, huge. Can't emphasize how much of an improvement that is. So there's that, and what else have I done? I've 3D printed a mirror mask for each. Again, that was just off Thingiverse, and installed that. And then obviously I've covered them with felt because they're open-ended, so you get lots of so it's really interesting you say about a metal bar made for the guide scope. So I could have got a Lost Mandy plate, but I was trying to keep the price down because a Lost Mandy plate like that is about £28 or thereabouts. And one of the things about this project was to try as best I could to keep the price low. It hasn't quite worked out that way, but we don't tell my wife. So there's no 2 ways about it. It's really flipping expensive to do this. There's no shadow of a doubt. You're duplicating most things, duplicating the scopes, duplicating the focuses, duplicating the cameras, and then you have to come up with solutions to do stuff. Yeah, it's interesting, but I think in terms of this particular project, everything was secondhand, that I could make it secondhand, or I made it myself. So one of the cameras was both the cameras were actually secondhand. I designed all of these bits. I modified the scopes secondhand. So yeah, you've got absolutely. You should always look for bargains, but don't buy rubbish. It's really important that you will end up. Well, sorry, this is probably just me. I have ended up buying stuff thinking, oh yeah, I'll fix that up, or I'll develop a widget that'll fix the problem with this, and then you end up spending so much time on that you don't actually image and you don't get anything out of it. Sometimes it does get to the point where sadly you do have to spend a bit of money. But you can see here, remember I was talking about the focal length, that distance there is less than that distance there, even though I know that the mirror is in the same position on both because I deliberately tried to make them the same. But the focal length is slightly different. So what? God, there's loads in the chat. Hello everybody, Cheap Astro, hello there. And spend so much money in the end that I could buy an EQ8 mic. You know what? You could, but all of this, and 3 counterweights is on an AZ EQ6. And an AZ EQ6 is flipping heavy. It's like it's welded to the ground, but you can lift it. Not with everything on. It's really, really heavy with everything on, but AZ EQ6 is a great mount if you're planning on doing a project like this. So yeah, it's a good mount, and it guides really well. It's actually guiding very well tonight, even though I did my level best to prevent it from guiding well. So don't worry about the dithering, that's fine. This is the bit you need to look at. So typically when it's clear, it's doing this. Oh yeah, okay, cool. In your situation, absolutely, I get that. yeah, so forgive my dithering. Obviously, it has to dither. I can make this better if I was to, you know, balance everything properly, but I was a bit rushed tonight. So, let's have a quick look at what we've got. So, there's a bit of Andromeda from one of the scopes, and there's the other bit of Andromeda from the other of the scopes. Obviously, vignetting, which flats will take care of, that will disappear. Matt, oh, thank you. I'm very grateful for you saying that. That's really nice. Thank you very much, Matt. You know, that's very, very, very kind of you to say that. So thank you. That's very kind. What I might do, shall I go and get on the other telescope and see how that's going? Because we've kind of looked at this one now, haven't we? What's the frequency of the dithering, and how many frames, and how long? So dithering, see, it's autofocusing again on this one. That's interesting. Why is it doing that so quickly? Obviously, this one is more susceptible. So how often? I'm dithering every 3 frames. So I've set it up in the sequencer. That's the wrong one to look at. Look at this one. So dithering after every 3 exposures, and it dithers for basically shifts it a number of pixels. I don't know how many. It's a setting in Nina somewhere. It's usually about 6 pixels or something like that. And once it's done that, it waits for the mount to settle again, and then it kicks off another exposure. So that's what it does. So every 3 at the moment. I used to do them every 1. You don't need to. You just don't. 3 is enough. And also you find if you do it every 1, because with these cheaper mounts, and I know they're not cheap. Nothing's cheap in astronomy. It really isn't. But with these cheaper mounts, they take ages to settle. So, oh, you do every 6 frames and 2 pixels. Okay, cool. I ought to, if I ever get time, I should experiment with it. Yeah, it does mess up your guiding, absolutely. Yep. So these figures would be probably closer to arc second if dithering was not there. But you know what, I don't complain about dithering. It helps with noise, so that's fine. And the other thing on here is that's my very first ever astro camera, which is a 290C, which again was second hand. And all of these are just not AliExpress, these are eBay specials, these clamps. So yeah. Oh, I got a delivery today. Do you want to see my delivery? I'll go and get my delivery. 1 second. There we go. Here's my delivery. It's a filter wheel, but it's a manual filter wheel, and it was really cheap. So yeah, and basically you have a thumb wheel there, and oh, it's a bit squeaky. It is a bit squeaky, isn't it? Okay, I have to deal with that. But it's a 5-position manual filter wheel, and I'm planning, because what I've been doing, because I've been concentrating on the dual telescope rig, I want to set up another telescope, and I want to put my single filters. So I've had to duplicate filters as well. I didn't say that, did I? I've had to duplicate my filters. So basically, all my single filters I want to put in here, and then this can have a 26C camera on. But I noticed that this is open here, this bit just here. So I looked through there, and although it said no light leaks. I can see light. You know, we can cover that up with tape. That's fine. Because you're not going to be, I'm not going to be doing narrowband with this. This is just put UVIR, an L Enhance, I think it is, an L Pro. Hell has that. I've got another light pollution one I would like to put in here, and another one. I can't remember. It's basically 5 filters in that, and I want to set that up with a 26C, and then that will just be a sort of general purpose filtery thing. So that's it. Yeah. Okay. What have we got? Right. Chief Pastor, I said in my life is that you've probably got 3D printed spider in both of my PDSs. Yes, I do. Absolutely. So the whole idea behind this, to make this work, was to make them identical. So I've flocked them both the same. I've painted the mirrors the same. I've 3D printed everything the same. I've used the same screws. The only thing that's not the same, which you can see, is the fact that that's a different focuser. Excuse me. Or buy a metal one. Yeah, but the thing is, I can 3D print a spider in about 2 hours, and it costs me nothing. Well, obviously electricity and materials, and then a bit of engineering effort to make it fit, and away I go. Or I could spend another 300 quid on a metal one. And yes, I agree, the metal one is superior, and it would make these two telescopes into 100% of an astrograph. They would be astounding. The only thing which would let them down is probably the focusers. But I kind of think it's so I'm not made of money, but I think it's important that we try our best to be realistic about what the scopes can achieve at this sort of budget level, because these are cheap scopes. They really are. I don't know. Yeah, I know that there are some machined ones on AliExpress, which I've not investigated. Am I a member? Oh, hello, Spaceman22. Evening, Andy. Are you a member of any astronomy clubs? And is it worth joining one? Right. That is a fantastic question. Yes, I am a member of an astronomy club. And I need some water. I've got a really dry throat. Is it worth joining one? Absolutely. And I have a confession to make. I've been once. But I am on their chat group. So I chat to people, and it's just a kind of WhatsAppy type thing. And they have Zoom meetings every month. And they have in-person meeting, not in a face. That would be ridiculous. Every month, and they're also hosted on Zoom as well. They also have an observatory, and they do outreach. And I've taken our scout group before, and they were utterly brilliant. So, is it worth joining an astronomy club? Yes, 110% worth it. Some of the things I've learnt just through a chat group have been great. I am studying still, so I've started my planetary science course. I say started, I'm 33% of the way through according to the Open University. If I pass this, that will give me my Open University certificate in astronomy and planetary science, only if I pass it. And to be honest, I was meant to be studying tonight, and I didn't because I've been playing with my telescope, so my bad. But hopefully I'll catch up. I've got a tutorial tomorrow anyway, so that's why I'm not producing loads of videos, because I've got loads of commitments with kids, my kids, and other things, but also because I'm studying, and I have to do about an hour and a half a night, and then about 3 hours every day at a weekend. I do take some time off though, and I work full time, of course. So yeah, it's and I'm it's all cool. It's just a lot of work. So next, April, May time, I think I've got my exam. And if I pass that, only if I pass that, well, obviously I'll get the certificate, and then I'm done. It's just so much work. I can't do any more. I just can't. Not at the moment. I'm losing my headspace. So I need to think carefully about, obviously, family commitments and stuff. And my kids have been brilliant. My son, my eldest, takes his GCSEs this year, and he's just done his mocks. So hopefully he'll be cool. So I need to really be around for when he's needing his headspace to do stuff. So yeah, that's really important to me. And we're also, this is weird, you know, when you have kids you don't realise this, but we're now looking for sixth forms, and you kind of think, oh my goodness, he's going to sixth form in 4 years or 3 years. He's going to be going to university, and that's just gone so quickly. Right, I'm going really so you're going to speak of that. I'm beginning to suspect that image of the rig isn't live. Okay, sorry, I've been wittering on. I shouldn't witter on. There you go. This is real. It's guiding the stars and everything. And then you've got images. Right, should we go and look at the other rig? So Andromeda, it's not going to change. It'll still be Andromeda. So so going back to that question about being a member of an astronomy club, do it. Find a local one and go and talk to people. It's really, really good. So yes, thoroughly recommend being in an astronomy club. Okay, so I'm going to disconnect this computer and then connect to my other computer. Bear with me, because I have to go outside to do that, and I'm going to get a glass of water. So I'll be back in a moment. Please stay with me, and we'll go and look at the other rig. 1 second. Hello, I'm back. So I've just unplugged network, and I've also noticed there was a problem with one of the other. Oh look, it's connected via Wi-Fi. Oh, well, that's interesting. I didn't expect my Wi-Fi to get across the garden. I'm just going to check something out on the camera. That would explain it. So I've been imaging without cooling. That's why the lights are off. Oh, well, I'll switch that on. Doesn't matter. I was wittering. It's fine. Right, let's go out of there. And I'll put a picture up. Right, I'm just going to go into my other. hopefully, once it's found the network. This is interesting. My Wi-Fi is working in the garden. That doesn't normally happen. So I run a long cable. Okay, let's have another go. Is it going to connect this time? Hooray! Come on, move across. Just go to that. Ooh, that looks a bit liney. Okay. Okay, right. This is looking okay-ish. Don't worry about these. I'm not worried about these. That's cool. Ooh, focus curve looks... That's alright. That'll do. Okay, cool. So we'll start with PhD. This is looking great. Okay, what you're looking at is an EQ3 mount, and on this mount we have a mono setup with a 533M and a filter wheel and a 60 EDF scope, which is reduced. I think it's 288mm it's been reduced to, and I can almost guarantee that that dithering there is as a result of me going outside or logging on to this computer. And I am, someone's going to shout at me now, but I am convinced that the moment you log onto a computer, it takes up some of the processing power and things go nuts. So look at that. That's really good. Good dithering, good guiding, and then I log on at this point and it does that. I'm probably talking rubbish. I usually do. Okay, so let's look in Nina. Right, which filter are we on? Right, so we are currently... Actually, let's look at the equipment. So camera is cooling nicely. I only ever cool to -5 because I do. And filter wheel. So we are currently on the S2. So we've done HA, O3, and now we're on S2. This filter wheel has 7 filters. Such dry throat tonight. So pretty much if I get through S2, then that can create an image, because I've got enough to do RGB, or I could do an SHO palette or something else. So basically I've only programmed the sequencer here to do HA, hydrogen, oxygen, sulfur, and UV IR as well as a luminance channel. I don't need that. I don't need the luminance channel. I could use, well, hydrogen basically, because hydrogen is obviously the brightest. So at the moment we are, did I say sulfur? Yeah, we're taking sulfur on the sulfur filter there. And if we go back to the sequencer, yeah, so that, so we're here, basically we're on 30 of 85, and I'm not going to be leaving anything out tonight because I was caught in the rain the other day and I had to dry everything out. It didn't do any damage, everything works, everything's fine, but yeah, I was caught in the rain, so I don't want that to happen. And it's kind of, well, you can see, I don't know if you can see, it says it's going to be mostly cloudy soon anyway, so I'll just take advantage for the next hour. Yeah, so imaging wise there won't be much to see. With YouTube compression, I mean I can see it here locally, even with going through a VNC connection I can see it a bit, but that's I'm imaging the Sol nebula there. Let's have a look at the other rig, which was that one. There we go. So this was, so many windows now, I'm getting a bit lost. Okay. So we've got Andromeda, And then on the other rig, we've got the Sol Nebula, which you can't see. Thank you very much. Thanks very much for joining. Yeah, you guys take care. If you're still with me, that's brilliant. I'm going to keep going for a few more minutes, and then I think I'll probably wrap. But basically, the EQ3 mount is actually really quite good, and I'm quite pleased with it. Although I thought I would get better guiding on it, but then I think if you can get below 2 arc seconds, you're doing quite well with guiding on an EQ3. And it's just a really simple mount, and it works quite well, which is good. So yeah, for a lightweight rig, perfect. EQ3, really good, cheap and cheerful. I got mine second hand, and yes, it was knackered and I had to fix it, but now it works really well, so it's all good. Let's go back to Andromeda, see what's happening there. So that's the EQ3, that's Andromeda. So this is the dual scope again. Let's go to imaging so you can see the two cameras side by side. Okay, advantages of doing the dual scope rig and disadvantages. What would I have done differently? How heavy is my dual scope rig? Very heavy. I have not weighed it. Everything there. So I think these are 2.5 or 5 kilos. I can never remember. So you can't lift this. You obviously can't lift. I mean, an EQ6 is super heavy. It's bolted to the ground. Plus, there's however many kilos of weight there. Each of these are probably about 10 kilos. No, they're not. They're less than that because this mount can't take 20 kilos. So there must be about 5 or 6 kilos each. Plus the mounting plate, which is at 2 or 3 kilos. So I would imagine we are close to the limit on this. You could probably push the mount a bit further. I won't be. I'm done with this dual scope rig thing. I've kind of proved it works now. As long as I can get an image and stack it and process it and prove that it does look good, which I haven't done yet, then I've proved to myself what I wanted to achieve, and to do it on a budget. What would make this easier is to have this in a permanent observatory. There's no shadow of a doubt about it. This evening, and this is after a lot of prep, took nearly 2 hours to get going because of issues with Nina, stuff just not working, polar alignment, aligning the telescopes, cameras disconnecting, focusing. For some reason, both scopes were massively out of focus, and I couldn't find the focus point, so I had to. That took an hour. Many of those things will improve if I do this more regularly, but because also part of this was because of the weather, because you gather twice as much light, or duplicate. Basically, it's the equivalent of having a telescope out for 2 nights in 1 night. But the time it takes to rig it and to get everything going, it didn't work out for me tonight. So I'm now questioning: is it worth doing? It is. The reward I get is because I've really enjoyed building stuff as well. So it's great. I love building and tweaking and doing that kind of thing. But is it worth doing with 2 flimsy, cheap Newtonians and the expense associated with it and everything else? Is it worthwhile? It's more worthwhile if you do it with 2 small refractors where you can lift them off as 1 unit. I think that is a better way to do it. Obviously I've done this on the cheap, so you know the scopes. I had one of the scopes. The other one was 100 quid. It was second hand. The cameras were second hand. This camera was second hand. I 3D printed stuff, so I've tried to keep the cost low. And by doing that, obviously if it was two Takahashis on there, they would look after themselves and be really good. But it's not. It's two cheap scopes which I've had to modify in order to make them into almost as good as you know, something that's more stable and whilst they'll be brilliant, they'll never be a Takahashi. So yeah, so if you want a challenge, have a go, but I recommend you do it with refractors, because refractors behave more than two flimsy Newtonians. But be under no illusions. I love this. This is great. It's just fun, but really frustrating. So frustrating. So Cheap Astro says 4.4 kilos each standard trim. Yeah, that's about right, I think. And I've added stuff. So if that's 4.4, so that's taking up to 9-ish. And then, you know, cameras, a couple of kilos, so 9, 10, 11, 12, 14. So I reckon it's probably about 18 kilos with all the metalwork and everything else, just the scopes. And then you've obviously got additional mounts, and you don't count the counterweights when you're thinking about the weight of a rig. So if you look at the spec for this rig, do I have one mini computer for both rigs? Yes. 2 versions of Nina. Oh look, it's autofocusing. First autofocus we've seen on this rig. So 2 versions of Nina, a primary and a secondary. They are synchronized using the synchronization app, which is a plugin. So I've got Hocus Focus and also the synchronization plugin. And within the sequencer, on both scopes, you have to do synchronized dither. So that one's got synchronized dither, and this one also has synchronized dither. And they talk to each other. The master scope leads with dithering, and the secondary scope follows. And that way you will never have dithering whilst a exposure is taking place. I hope that makes sense. But the big issue I've found is that the cameras disconnect. So there's obviously a software thing. So I don't know if you follow Bray Fall's astrophotography channel or astronomy channel. He's the guy who's built those enormous buildings. I think he's got 5 or 6 of them now in, I think it's Arizona, or anyway, somewhere in the middle of Nevada or wherever. And basically he's got a triple scope rig using 3 versions of Nina, and he, with his ZWO cameras, is getting them disconnecting as well. So that's on his channel, and obviously he's using I think he's using, I don't think he's using edge scopes, he's using RASers, I think. So he's using very fast scopes and imaging at something like f1.2 or 1.3. I mean, it's incredibly fast, very, very, very dim objects that he's imaging. So yes, this is running on one mini computer, and the 2 instance and PhD2, and then on the other rig there's another mini computer. By far the best ones are those Melee mini computers. They're just cheap and reliable, and they're fan free, so they don't blow moisture into the computer or pull moisture through. They're air cooled, so they cool in the atmosphere. But in the UK it's so flipping cold here anyway, it doesn't matter. So yeah, so that's That's how that's working. So the two are synchronized together. Sorry, this is on Wi-Fi, which is why it's going a weird color. Let's go back to this one. And so I am sure that after all that good guiding, that these are as a result of me connecting to the computer. So what I might do is log off this one and wrap this stream. Let's just quickly look in Nina, make sure everything's good. Yeah, it's all fine. So this one hasn't got long to go actually. So it should finish in about half an hour, 40 minutes. So there you go. I thought you'd be interested in seeing a bit of dual telescope rig stuff, and see the other rig as well, this one. Hopefully I'll try and get another video. I should have recorded this. I could have cut some of this in, and I didn't. I'm a fool. Oh well. Yeah, so there we go. Let's have a quick look at Andromeda. It's always good value for money. Hello, Andromeda. That's mad, isn't it? Absolutely mad. 1, 2, and 3 galaxies, and probably millions more that we just cannot see through 2 tiny telescopes in my back garden. Madness. It never ceases to amaze me. Did I actually turn that on for cooling? Yep, I did. Okay, so that camera's now cooled as well. Cool. Oh well, I've lost a bunch of subs then because they were not cooled. Hey ho. Okay, guys, thank you so much for joining, and it was just a spontaneous sort of come here and say hello, but thank you very much for joining me. I really appreciate your time, really, for joining, and please feel free to keep chatting if you want, or leave a comment or a like. I'll try and get another video out soon, depends on study and stuff, but yeah, take care everyone, and I wish you all clear skies, and I'll hopefully get another video out soon. So see you soon. Take care.